Imagine checking into the most beautiful hotel in all of South America. Crystal chandeliers, hand-carved mahogany banisters, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking one of the most breathtaking waterfalls on Earth. A place so stunning that the Colombian elite, presidents, aristocrats, artists, lined up just to spend a single night inside its walls. Now imagine that this same hotel, this palace of wonder, became the single most lethal building in the entire country. A place where guests didn't just check in, they checked out permanently.
Welcome to Hotel del Salto, the Hotel of the Leap, a building that saw so much death it was eventually abandoned, left to rot above the falls, haunted by the souls of everyone who ever stood at its windows and made a final, terrible decision. This is not fiction. Every single detail you're about to hear is real, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why some places on Earth seem to be cursed, not by superstition, but by history, tragedy, and human despair.
To understand why Hotel del Salto was so deeply haunted, we first have to go back, way back, not just to 1923 when the hotel was built, but centuries earlier, to the indigenous people who called these cliffs home long before any Spanish boot ever touched South American soil. The Muisca people. One of the most advanced civilizations in pre-colonial South America. They built cities, traded gold, and developed complex spiritual beliefs. And above all else, they revered the Tequendama Falls, a 157-foot drop where the Bogota River plunges into a roaring abyss. To the Muisca, this waterfall wasn't just a natural wonder. It was sacred, a gateway between worlds. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, they didn't just want land. They wanted submission. They burned villages, they enslaved people, they dismantled centuries of culture in the name of God and gold. And the Muisca, faced with a choice between slavery and death, chose something else entirely.
They leaped, by the hundreds, into the falls, into the sacred waters they believed would carry their souls to the next world. It was an act of defiance, a refusal to be broken. But it also soaked these cliffs in something intangible, something that would linger for centuries. Fast forward to 1923. Colombia is a nation modernizing at speed. The wealthy elite of Bogota want luxury retreats, places where they can escape the city and breathe mountain air. Enter architect Carlos Arturo Tapias, who designs a stunning Gothic-style mansion on the very cliff above those same falls where the Muisca once leaped to their deaths. The timing was not considered an omen. It should have been.
In its heyday, Hotel del Salto was absolutely magnificent. Guests arrived by train from Bogota, a journey that wound through dramatic Andean valleys before arriving at the hotel's grand entrance. The lobby gleamed. The dining room hosted Colombia's most powerful families. Presidents stayed here, foreign diplomats, artists and intellectuals who gathered over fine wine and watched the mist rise from the falls below. The view from the hotel's massive windows was, and still is, genuinely one of the most spectacular sights in South America. The Tequendama Falls crash down with a power that you can feel in your chest from hundreds of feet away. The sound is permanent, constant, a roar that never stops, day and night, in your room, at dinner, in your sleep. A sound that, if you listened long enough, started to sound less like water and more like voices.
A sound that, if you listened long enough, started to sound less like water and more like voices. The hotel thrived for decades, but by the 1950s and 60s, Colombia was changing. Political violence tore through the country. The wealthy retreated to guarded estates in Bogota. The river below the falls became severely polluted, industrial runoff turning the once pristine waters black and toxic. The mist that drifted up from the falls began to smell. The magic was fading, and then the deaths began. No one knows exactly when the first person leaped from the cliffs near Hotel del Salto. There was no official registry, no record kept, But somewhere along the way, between the decades of prosperity and decline, the hotel gained a dark reputation. Guests would stand at those enormous windows, staring down at the falls hundreds of feet below, and something would happen to them. Something would change. Local stories began to accumulate. A businessman who had checked in perfectly healthy was found missing from his room in the morning. A young woman who had come with her family for a weekend retreat wandered out of the hotel before dawn. A retired general, a war hero, found at the base of the falls. One after another, year after year, the deaths piled up. What made this uniquely terrifying is that many of these weren't people who had come to the hotel to die. They were tourists, vacationers, families, people who arrived happy and left in coffins, or didn't leave at all.
There was something about the place itself, the relentless sound of the falls, the isolation, the knowledge of what had happened here before. Something was pulling people toward the edge. Psychologists who have studied sites like this, places sometimes called suicide hotspots, describe a phenomenon where the combination of location, isolation, and environmental cues creates a kind of psychological trap. The brain, under stress, becomes susceptible to suggestion. And Hotel del Salto was suggestion itself, a building perched on a cliff above a sacred death site, where the constant sound of falling water drowned out rational thought. The hotel tried to continue operating. Managers were replaced. The building was renovated. But by the 1990s, the situation had become untenable. The river pollution was catastrophic. The Bogota River below the falls was ranked among the most polluted waterways in the world. The stench was constant. The tourists stopped coming. And in 1993, Hotel del Salto closed its doors for the last time. It did not, however, stop being deadly.
For years after closing, Hotel del Salto sat completely empty. Nature began reclaiming it. Vines crept up the Gothic stonework. Moss grew across the dining room floors. The chandeliers hung dark and dusty over tables that would never again be set for dinner. The windows, those massive, beautiful windows overlooking the falls, remained intact, watching, as if waiting. Urban explorers began sneaking inside, and that's when the stories got stranger. Multiple people who explored the abandoned hotel in the early 2000s reported the same experiences independently of each other. An overwhelming feeling of being watched, cold spots in rooms where no windows were open, the sound of footsteps in empty corridors, shadows that moved against the direction of light, and most commonly, an inexplicable urge to walk toward the windows.
One explorer who documented his visit on a popular Colombian horror forum in 2006 wrote that he had to physically grab his friend by the arm and pull him away from the edge of a broken third-floor window. His friend, a perfectly rational man, not prone to depression, reported that for a moment he simply didn't remember where he was. He described it as a gap, like a few seconds of his life had been erased, and when they came back, he was leaning over a 3-story drop with no memory of walking there. These accounts multiplied, and while skeptics dismissed them as overactive imaginations in a creepy building, something else was happening outside the walls. In the years following the hotel's closure, the cliffs and surrounding area continued to see deaths. People who came specifically to the falls, not the hotel, and never went home. The land itself seemed marked. Colombian authorities eventually installed barriers and increased patrols in the area. Crisis intervention lines were posted at the overlooks. Mental health workers were deployed to the area during peak seasons. It helped, but it didn't stop it entirely. Some places, it seems, carry their history in their very soil.
In 2013, something unexpected happened. A group of Colombian naturalists, historians, and preservationists decided that Hotel del Salto was too important, too historically significant to simply decay into rubble. Despite its reputation,
despite the deaths, despite the overwhelming sense that this place wanted to be left alone, they restored it. Hotel del Salto reopened as the Tequendama Falls Museum of Biodiversity and Culture. The mission was noble, to document the natural history of the falls, the story of the Muisca people, the biodiversity of the Andean cloud forest. Staff were hired, exhibits were installed, the vines were trimmed back, the chandeliers were relit. But the building's dark energy didn't exactly welcome its new purpose. Museum staff, professional, educated, rational people began reporting strange occurrences almost immediately. Equipment malfunctioning in specific rooms, a particular hallway on the second floor where staff refused to work alone after dark, security cameras on the third floor capturing footage that was later described only as anomalous by the security company reviewing the tapes, footage that was never publicly released.
One curator, speaking anonymously to a Colombian documentary crew in 2016, described hearing what she thought was a guest moving around in a room that was, according to the official visitor log, empty. When she investigated, the room was locked from the outside. No one was inside. But the window, a window she was certain had been closed and latched that morning, was open. And from outside came the constant, indifferent roar of the fall. The museum continues to operate today. It draws thousands of visitors annually, ghost hunters, nature lovers, history enthusiasts, and the simply curious. Whether they feel the building's history the moment they step inside, or whether they complete their tour and leave with nothing but photographs, seems to depend entirely on the person. Some places choose who they reveal themselves to.
So what exactly is Hotel del Salto? Is it a haunted building? A psychological trap? A sacred site twisted by centuries of tragedy? Or simply a very beautiful, very sad place that absorbed too much human suffering to ever be entirely peaceful again? The honest answer is, we don't know. And that uncertainty is precisely what makes it so deeply unsettling. What we do know is this: the Muisca leaped here to escape something worse than death. The Spanish who drove them to it never faced justice. The hotel that was built above their sacred falls thrived on beauty, then became a magnet for despair. The river that powered the falls was choked by industrial poison. The building sat empty for years, visited by shadows and whispers. And now it stands open again, restored, preserved, a museum, while the falls roar on below, exactly as they always have, indifferent to every human story that has unfolded on these cliffs. There was something profound in that image. The permanence of nature versus the fragility of everything we build on top of it. Our hotels, our empires, our sense of control.
The falls were here before the Muisca. They were here before the Spanish. They were here before Carlos Arturo Tapias drew his first architectural line on paper. And they'll be here long after the museum closes for the last time and the vines finally swallow the building whole. If you ever find yourself in Bogota, you can take a train to Tequendama. You can walk into the museum. You can stand at those famous windows and look down at the falls, at the white water crashing endlessly into the gorge below. You can listen to the roar that never stops. Don't lean too far forward.